I'm in New Zealand. I'm going to be answering some questions about step 2 and life. Someone said, I don't think you mentioned how long your dedicated was. My dedicated was 5.5 weeks. How many days before did you take the NBMEs and UWorld self-assessment? I took the UWorld self-assessment, the first form, towards the beginning of dedicated. The second UWorld self-assessment I took maybe a couple weeks later. I didn't wait until the end of dedicated to take it like some people do. And I started taking NBMEs, like the full-length NBMEs, just sort of throughout dedicated. But I think I was sort of concentrating them more towards the end. I think I'm getting a little bit fuzzy on that. But I was mostly focusing on the Clinical Mastery Series forms and UWorld incorrects towards the beginning of my dedicated. What is the name of the piece that you're playing? Somebody asked what piece I was playing in one of my vlogs for the violin. It could have been the Bach Chaconne or Meditation from Thais. Did you complete all of your UWorld incorrects? I will have 1,500 incorrects of UWorld. If I decide to do incorrects, I may not have time for a second pass of the Clinical Mastery Series forms. Which would you prioritize? Ooh, this is like completely person dependent. I have a friend who scored really well on step 2 as well. She did UWorld incorrects, and she didn't do the Clinical Mastery Series forms or really focus much on the NBMEs. Personally, for me, I felt like my step 2 exam really felt a lot like my Clinical Mastery Series forms and like the NBMEs, just the way the questions are phrased, and it seemed like they were all sort of variations of the same questions. So I would probably prioritize that, but really it comes down to doing what you feel is best for you. If you think you would do, I guess just do what you feel is best for you. You can succeed either way. But if you do choose to do UWorld incorrects over the Clinical Mastery Series forms or the NBMEs, I would suggest doing some of that NBME material, the week before your exam. That way you're really fresh on the wording. Because I noticed that after doing UWorld incorrects, I was scoring slightly lower on my Clinical Mastery Series forms and NBMEs. And I think it's just sort of the wording thing and how the questions are structured. So I would sort of add that material in towards the end if you could. Opinion on electrical engineering as a pre-med. I think that any engineering degree is great as a pre-med. There isn't a lot of overlap in electrical engineering to the prerequisite courses that you need for medical school. So I studied mechanical engineering as my undergraduate degree, and there was just not a lot of overlap. You don't take organic chemistry, you don't take biochemistry, biology. So I ended up having to take all of those courses on top. I was sort of wishy-washy about going into medical school. So, I ended up taking it afterwards. Like I just graduated with mechanical engineering and then took a lot of those courses afterwards. I did take some of the courses like earlier on. It's confusing. I can talk about that a different time. But biomedical engineering might be a really good plan, or like chemical engineering, because you'll just get a lot of those courses that would already count. Like you're double dipping, right? Some of the courses will count for your engineering degree, but also for your prerequisite courses. What kind of doctor will you be in the future? Anesthesiologist. Did you ever use the first aid for step 2? I have heard a lot of negative things about it. I did not use first aid for step 2. I used my first aid for step 1 book, even when I was studying for step 2. But I used it mostly during dedicated. Towards the end, I was just sort of flipping through, making sure I was fresh on things. I think I did it just to make myself feel better, like I wasn't missing anything. What QBank would you recommend besides UWorld to practice high-yield content for step 2 CK stuff? Or UWorld is just enough? Is it any sense to go through UWorld twice? So the QBank I would recommend apart from UWorld would be all of the NBME content. And there's so much content that it's basically a QBank in and of itself. If you do the NBME full-length forms and the Clinical Mastery Series forms, there's over 1,000 questions at least. I don't know, maybe it's over 2,000. So I would say that. If you're talking an additional question bank on top of UWorld, on top of the NBME stuff, you could use AMBOSS. It seems like people are doing quite well with AMBOSS as well. Is there any sense of, UWorld twice? I personally wouldn't go through it twice. I would focus a lot on the NBME material. If you have a lot of time and you want to go through it twice, sure, why not? Just don't sacrifice the NBME material. Someone asked, congrats, where did you end up for residency? Do I want to reveal where I'm going to residency? People will probably find me anyway, but it's a secret. I appreciate sharing your experience. I'm preparing for myself for step 2. I did UWorld test in reading mode. Do you think it's more beneficial to be in test mode? It's the first turn of it. My score is around 55 to 60% for each block. I went through all of my UWorld in tutor mode. I think that's fine. You can go through on test mode. I think it's like potato. I do like reviewing the answers immediately after I do the question. That way I don't have to refresh myself on the question before I review the answer. Like if I do 100 questions all at once and then go back and review them, I find myself needing to review the question because I sort of forgot it before I review the answer, if that makes sense. So I think it sort of saves time in the end, although you are flip-flopping between question, answer. And I think there is some slowness that happens because you're constantly switching train of thought like that. But I personally liked tutor mode, but it's really up to you, whatever you prefer. I did my exam yesterday. I feel horrible leaving 7 to 8 questions, flag each block. What's your advice? It's so stressful. Try to not think about it if you just took your test yesterday. And also I flagged so many more questions than that. How many hours of sleep do you get when you wake up at 4 a.m.? I try to always get like 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Sometimes I'm not successful. It can be hard to go to sleep that early, like at 8 p.m. And oftentimes I didn't sleep that many hours. I'm not waking up at 4 a.m. anymore. I don't need to currently since I'm mostly done with med school. So but I'm definitely going to do that again in anesthesia residency though. I think I'll have no choice but to wake up at 4 a.m. And I probably won't be able to do questions beforehand because I'll have to like get there so early. Anyway, doesn't matter. How long are the usual residency interviews? Residency interviews, it really depends. So I was applying for anesthesia, but I was also doing like transitional year interviews and preliminary internal medicine and preliminary surgery interviews as well. So they all sort of varied. Anesthesia interviews, for the most part, were probably like a half day, about 4 hours. I did have one interview that was a full day. It was like 8 hours long. They had a bunch of like an informational session at the beginning of the day. The program director had a talk for like an hour. That one was long, but I'd say usually probably like 4 hours. And you're not being interviewed the entire time, so you have breaks. Like after you interview somebody, you might have like a 15-minute break, and then you'll go with the next interviewer. Usually you'll interview with a program director or associate program director, and then maybe 1 or 2 faculty members, and then the residents. So yeah, and in each of those interviews, typically we're around like 10 to 20 minutes, depending on the program. How long did a CMS form take you to do and review? Also, the incorrects of UWorld. Trying to see if I can fit more than one CMS form plus UWorld incorrects in one day. So I found if I pushed myself, I could get through about 100 questions per day. I'd say most of the time during dedicated, it was like around 80 to 100 questions per day. For the CMS form, they are 50 questions long. I don't know, I'm forgetting now, but probably like an hour and 15 minutes-ish to take. And then to review it, I would always say between 2 and 3 times that amount in order to review it. I think that's pretty realistic to do a CMS form and UWorld incorrects in one day. Yeah. If you do factor in, so with the Clinical Mastery Series forms, what I was doing is before I would take it, I would screenshot every single question. That way I could retake the same test again in the future. If you factor that in, it takes a little bit longer because you have to screenshot everything. But yeah. Would you drop onking? I've been doing it for a year now and only have less than 2,000 cards left and kept up with the reviews. Issue is it's too time consuming and like 4 hours a day and takes away time from doing practice questions. It helps me remember a lot of random facts, but I still get questions wrong and concepts I covered on Anki. Not sure if I'm really learning from Anki, and my UWorld average is low at 67%. I didn't rely a lot on flashcards. I did use flashcards for all of my shelf exams. So towards the beginning of each month, I would focus on Anki cards. I would use the Cheesy Dorian Step 2 deck. And like if I was on my OBGYN rotation, I would do those flashcards and questions. But I would do sort of the flashcards towards the beginning of the month, and then not do them anymore after that. And I would do questions all throughout the month. But yeah, I just dropped the flashcards altogether. I didn't do any during my dedicated. I just personally don't like flashcards that much, and I find it overwhelming to have a huge to-do list like that to get through. If you find them to be really helpful, keep doing it. It sounds like you're doubting it. I would say though that your UWorld average is 67%. That's actually pretty good. I mean, mine was like 62%. So, I mean, you could be doing really well with it. But if it's taking you 4 hours a day, that's a lot of time that you could be doing practice questions. So If it were me, I'd probably drop the flashcards, but I don't really want to advise anyone to do something if it's working for them. So you do you. Is that a terrible way of answering that? Which Melman PDFs and videos did you do? He recommends doing all NBMEs twice. Not sure that's a good idea or use of time. I find his YouTube channel hard to navigate. Too many videos, not organized, or contain mix of step 1 and step 2 material. Hard to differentiate. Yeah, it can be hard to differentiate. I would say, all of his PDFs for the shelf exams would be pretty helpful if you can go through those. I didn't get through all of them. I even forget which ones that I went through at this point. But those were pretty good, high yield information. Also, I think his high yield arrows PDF is also very good. Other than that, I just watched his little short videos while I was getting ready in the morning and just listened to them. Or I think he's on Spotify. I think that's what I was doing. Or maybe I had YouTube running when I was driving. Don't worry, I didn't look at it, but just like playing. Yeah, you could probably do either of those just to sort of listen. And you can listen like randomly. If you get some step 1 content in there, it's not going to hurt you. Or you could just skip it. I have a question. How long did you take to prep for Comlex in step 2, and how long was the gap between the two? Thank you. So I had my dedicated was about 5.5 weeks, and I took step 2. Then I took how many days between the two? Like 4 days? 5 days?
I think it was 5, yeah.
Okay, 5 days. And then I took level 2. But between the two, so the day after I took step 2, did I start studying or did I take that day off? Okay, so after step 2, I took 1 day off. Then I studied all of the OMM content for 2 days, 3 days. Then I took a day off. Then I took level 2. That's what worked well for me. I didn't do any of like the level 2 prep before taking step 2. I only did level 2 prep in between, and it was just like OMM material. I've failed step 1 2 times and my emotions go in waves. I think passing step 1 is not meant for people like me. Don't give up. Step 1 is a ridiculous exam. I'd say just really, really, really focus on doing practice exams before trying to take it again and really understand the stuff. Like read the explanations, read why the incorrect answers are incorrect. And with enough practice, I'm sure you can do it because there's a finite amount of information that can go on the exam. And I found the test writers seem to like the same topics sort of over and over. And I think if you do enough questions, you start to notice what pattern they have in their questions, and then you can get better at it. So keep at it, keep going, focus on the NBME content if you can, and don't give up. Just keep going. It's a dumb test, and I found step 2 to be a much easier test. Like when I took step 1 afterwards, I was crying and worried that I failed. Same with level 1. I am an anxious person, so that there's that, but I felt so much worse after step 1 than I did after step 2. And step 2 was a more important exam for my class because we took step 1 when it was pass fail. But yeah, I felt way worse after step 1. So I think just get past that and things will get a little bit better. Okay, let's go for now and I can answer more later. Okay. No, please stop. No joking around this kind of stuff. It's not funny.